Hey guys, we've got big news for you today. NIO just released their earnings report for Q3 of 2020 and they absolutely smashed it. Let's jump into things. So as you may know, if you've been watching EV stocks, they've been absolutely exploding right now, and NIO has been the front runner of the massive growth that space has seen. NIO is leading the charge as one of the biggest Chinese-backed EV manufacturers, and they're absolutely exploding. Recently, they've gone on a major run, going up about 200, maybe even 250% over just the last couple of months. Now, I was lucky enough to be able to get into the stock at around the $12 mark. I bought a couple more shares at the $15 mark, and finally some at the $18 mark, and now it has had a huge major run up. It even hit above $50 in just the past couple of weeks, and then it dropped back down, and I think right now it's trading about $45 per share. So I want to talk about the earnings. I'm going to talk about where this is going to go and what's going to happen to the stock, as well as if I'm buying, if I'm trading options on it, what I'm going to do with this particular stock. So with any electric vehicle company, of course, the thing that you want to know about is how many deliveries do they actually make, right? It's one thing to actually make the cars, but then it's another thing to actually sell those cars. So how many cars did they actually sell? Well, they had deliveries of 12,206 vehicles, which is up from last quarter's number of 10,300. I think it's also worth noting that this is over 3 times what it was for Q3 of 2019. The other thing that's important beyond just the number of vehicles is how much they're actually going to make on each of those vehicles that get sold, right? The margin for these vehicles is a huge driving factor beyond how quickly the company can scale, how much of that cash they're able to get back and put back into operations to continue to grow and scale even further. Vehicle margin went up almost 5% in just the last quarter. In quarter 2, it was sitting at 9.7%, and for quarter 3, we're sitting at 14.5%. So this is a big factor in being able to produce cash and bring that back to the bottom line. It's also worth noting that in the third quarter of 2019, NIO was actually sitting at negative 6.8% on the vehicle margin. And guys, this is absolutely huge because it's what drives the ability to continue to produce more vehicles and make those vehicles even better. And also total revenues are up about 20% from quarter 2 of 2020. I've been reading a ton of articles and watching a ton of videos on these different EV companies, such as NIO, XPeng, Li, BYD, a lot of these different companies and what they're seeing right now. And one of the things that I keep seeing get repeated is that there's a ton of demand in China for these electric vehicles. There's been a huge spark for these EV companies and people want to buy these electric vehicles. And so I think that there's going to be increased demand for all of these companies across the board over the next little while. The other thing that's good to see about these earnings report is that the gross margin is also going up. In quarter 2, it was at 8.4%, and now in quarter 3, it's sitting at 12.9%. This is a massive increase, and I think a lot of this comes from the economy of scale that you get for these other services that they're getting. And this is hugely important because a lot of this is coming from their other operations, right? It could be service on the vehicles, or it's probably most likely their battery swapping technology they're running, right? To actually be able to do something like that is going to take a ton of capital and it's going to take a ton of upfront costs. So if they can continue to get the margin higher and higher on that particular side of the business, it's going to continue to strengthen their business overall. Now, all things considered, even though revenue's up, even though vehicle deliveries is up, and even though the gross margin is up as well, that doesn't mean that this company is actually profitable. However, they are on the right path. Their net loss per share is at just under $1 compared to Q2, whereas it's sitting at $1.15. So that number is going down and it's going to continue to increase that way until they finally get to the point where they're going to be profitable. At this rate, I'm guessing they're going to be profitable sometime early 2022, maybe mid or late 2022 at the latest. I think if they can continue on this trajectory, I think they're going to hit that profitability number a little bit sooner than a lot of other people are estimating. I think this is because you get the economy of scale, especially in the automotive industry, which is so capital intensive. You really need to get that economy of scale to be able to break into profitability, right? You need to sell more vehicles with a higher margin and be able to do that quicker with the manufacturing capabilities in order to achieve that profitability. So like I said, I think it's probably going to happen like early to mid 2022 if they continue on this current path. Now things could change, right? Demand could drop. We could go into lockdown again. I mean, who knows what's going to happen, but I think it's only going to increase. And as we continue to see more and more cars being manufactured, I think they're just going to continue selling those cars, especially as NIO is able to kind of break out and hopefully be the second place leader in the EV space right after Tesla. And that's also considering the fact that hopefully they can break into the European space and maybe even one day the American space, right? I think there's a lot of demand for that. And I think it's going to continue to move into that EV space, especially with China saying, hey, we want, I think it's 25% of all vehicles to be EV in the next 10 years or so, I think it was. I mean, it's just absolutely crazy crazy to see how much growth this individual space is actually going to go through, and all of the different companies that are going to benefit on the back of that. Now, where does this go from here? Well, I think NIO is going to continue to grow, and for that, I want to actually jump back into the earnings report to see what they say they're going to be able to do on their own. It says in the earnings report that they actually expect to grow another 35 to 39% in Q4 of 2020, increasing those vehicle deliveries from 16,500 to 17,000. And on the back of that, they're actually expecting the revenues to also increase anywhere from 38 to 42% for Q4. And again, I think a lot of this is going to come from having a slightly higher gross margin on those vehicles, as well as having more customers to actually use the battery swapping service and get service on their cars, things like that, right? That are actually going to increase revenues beyond just the vehicles sold. So with all that being said, let's actually jump into where the stock is at right now and where I think it's going to go from here. I'm going to pull this up here on Webull on my phone, which, by the way, get your free stocks using the link down in the description below if you haven't already done so. So looking at the information here on my Webull account, it actually says that the shares for NIO is down to about $45, which is down 3% from where it closed at. I think this is actually because there was so much hype built in before this earnings call that a lot of people were buying into it, bidding it up, and then now it's dropping off as people are starting to sell off based on the news. Everybody bought in expecting these earnings to absolutely crush it, which in my opinion, I think they did. They continue to see growth. They continued to see gross margin increase as well, which is the important factor when it comes to the automotive industry. And I think now the stock is actually selling off and the shares are decreasing in price. So is now the time to get in? Is now the time to sell options on this stock? Is now the time to, what are you going to do, right? Well, for me, I'm actually, kind of hoping it drops a little bit more. I think if I can get it under $40, I would love to buy back in and get some additional shares. Even though that's going to bring my cost basis up, I'd be okay with that, because looking at what this company has been able to achieve for the last 6 months since I first purchased those first couple shares, I think that this company has a lot of long-term growth, and they're backed by the Chinese government, which means that there's going to be, they're basically not going to be allowed to fail because China wants to see them do so well. So I think there's going to be a lot of growth. I think that the stock will continue to increase in the long term, and that's really my play here, is to hold on to it for the long term. I don't really care if it's going to be up in a month. I don't care if it's down in a month. I'd like to buy it under $40 because I think that in 2 or 3 or maybe even 5 years, I think it's going to be a hell of a lot higher than where it sits right now at that roughly, $40 to $45 mark. So should you also do the same? I don't know. That's the decision for you. Hopefully you bought in earlier if you could. If you're looking to hold for the long term, I would recommend buying in if you can. But just know that if you're looking to trade on the short term, or you're looking to trade options, this is going to be a very volatile stock that's going to see a lot of ups and a lot of downs, just like all the other companies have, especially in this space. I mean, Tesla was the leader for that, and it's been extremely volatile until just recently. So on that news, congrats to Tesla for getting into the S&P 500. That's absolutely fantastic news and has helped push my Tesla shares even higher in the price. So with that being said, NIO, their shares are down after hours, but absolutely fantastic earnings report. I'm really happy with it. I think it shows that they're on the right path, and I think they're going to continue to see this increased growth. So with that being said, guys, if you like this video, give me a thumbs up. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you want to learn more about stocks, money, real estate, anything like this, if you love talking about EV vehicles, I'm going to be releasing a ton of more videos just like this one. So make sure to subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.